Welcome to, is this smooth? Welcome to Beyond at Home. Hey, today we are looking at some of the things that you've maybe carried from your past into your present circumstances, any habits that are still affecting you today. Today on this episode of Beyond at Home, we're looking at how you can go about stepping into the life intended for you and the difference it will make to your life today and in the future. On our last episode of Beyond at Home, we started this conversation around the things in your life that you've decided to buy, things you've decided to subscribe to with the hope that they'll make some type of difference in your life. We talked about this internal evaluator within us, but then asked this question of what's the difference? What's the difference? When it comes to the things you subscribe to, the food meal deal kits, the gym membership, the things that you buy, the tech that you buy, the things that you're chasing after or collecting in the hope that it makes a difference in your life. We're asking this question of how will this help me save time? How will this help me and my family? How will this help me in my everyday? What's the difference? We kind of pointed it back to this big statement, right? This big statement that if it doesn't make a difference, we become indifferent towards it. If it doesn't make a difference, we become indifferent towards it. So then we use this statement, we put it within the context of our own kind of faith journey. Because ultimately, when it comes to God, creator of the universe, well, if God doesn't make a difference, if God isn't making a difference in our own life, if we feel like in our own kind of pivotal circumstances, in our everyday moments, the times where we've kind of reached out for the first time, maybe we prayed and there's just nothing kind of came back. It just wasn't making a difference. If God doesn't make a difference, then we can become indifferent towards God. But in running with this belief in doing so, what we also said is that we actually miss out on this life in abundance, that Jesus came to give us life and life abundantly, or life to the full. See, Jesus was a difference maker. Last week, we began to tackle this question. We recognized that we first had to define a faith relationship. We had to define a faith relationship to define our relationship with God. Because ultimately, when it comes to any of our relationships stall when we don't know where we stand. So we went to this guy named Paul. Paul was one of the biggest influences of the Jesus movement after Jesus himself. And here's what we got from Paul, that when we don't know where we stand in a relationship, yes, it's impossible to move forward, to grow, to develop, but Paul gives us some context in his letter that he wrote to a group of early followers of Jesus in Rome. This is what Paul wrote in Romans 5 verse 1. He says, "Therefore, since we've been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ." But because of what Jesus has done, that we have peace with God, our relationship with God has been defined. And what Paul is really clearly saying is that, we can be indifferent about God, but ultimately God isn't indifferent about us. Paul continues on in his verse. He continues to unpack grace and this love that God has shown for us, this grace that God has shown. And he says there's nothing we can do to make God love us more. This is kind of his key point. He says there's nothing we can do to make God love us more. And inevitably, that leads us often to sometimes ask this question, well, does that mean we can just live however we want? Like, if God is just going to love me regardless, can I just live however I want? And Paul had an answer up his sleeve for early followers of Jesus who were asking this at the time. He goes on in Romans 6 verse 2. He says, knock yourself out. No, he doesn't. He doesn't say knock yourself out. No, he actually says by no means, or certainly not, absolutely not. And then he tells us why by no means you should do this. He says, we are those who have died to sin. We have died to anything, the mistakes, the errors we made once or continue to make in our life, the things that are rupturing our relationship with others and ultimately with our Heavenly Father. We have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? Why would we go on sinning is really the key point that Paul is getting to. Why should we go on living a way that will lead us to a decayed, detached, ruptured, and indifferent relationship with others and with God? Paul is saying that you have died to sin. Paul's saying it doesn't make any sense to live in that way any longer. So one of the first photos I ever put on my Facebook account when I was pretty young, like pre-teen kind of days, was a photo of me wearing an outfit that I wore quite often and honestly, like for a very long time as well. I was really big into wearing this real fashion statement piece. It was a three-piece ensemble of a fedora, a V-neck shirt, and a shark tooth necklace. And now, You hear those things now and you think about that photo, and I thought it was a fantastic outfit. But if I was to wear that today, you would know that that fashion style on me would just be a mess. It would be horrendous. Of course, unless you're someone who wears fedoras, V-necks, and shark tooth necklaces, you would know that it's just simply not in style anymore. I had a lot of courage to wear it. I don't know if you have an outfit in your life you look back at now, or maybe even a jacket or a particular shirt or a hat, something you wore that one day somebody came up to you and was just like, you need to stop wearing that. No longer can you wear that piece. The reality was that in this moment, this fedora, V-neck, shark tooth necklace kind of get together, everyone knew that it was just something I couldn't get away with anymore. People told me, you need to take that outfit off. And this is what Paul is getting to when it comes to this old way of living, this life of sin. This is what he was saying to followers of Jesus. You don't need to live in this any longer. You don't need to wear it any longer. See, this is what Paul is saying in his writings to the early followers of Jesus. We are those who've died to sins, those of us who put our faith in Jesus. Something has changed inside of us. Jesus is a difference maker. We've died to our old ways of living. How can we live in sin any longer? See, my question kind of to Paul is this, like, what does this even look like to live like this if this is true? Because this isn't just something that we just believe. We don't just believe. It can't just be a mental trick. Surely that one day, like we're saying, like, okay, faith is in Jesus. Now sin, like that's something I'm leaving in the past. Like this isn't just something we can switch off. And Paul is saying, no, like that's not the case. There's actually something that we can do with it. In another one of Paul's letters, he writes to a group of Ephesians in the church in Ephesus, and he unpacks this and he gets really specific about what we can do, because he wants the early followers to experience growth in maturity and growth in security. This is what Paul writes in Ephesians 4 verse 22. He says, throw off, just like that jacket, that outfit, shark tooth necklace, fedora, V-neck, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by deceitful desires. Paul is saying, like, look, getting rid of the old makes a huge difference. You need to lay it aside. And the word corrupted that Paul is using in his letter really means anything that is spoiled, anything that's rotten, this process of being destroyed. And when he's talking about deceitful desire, like what's that? Like, well, we've all experienced it at some point, like wanting something in the moment that we knew just wasn't right, that wasn't going to be good for us or the people around us. And yet we desire to do it anyway. It's almost like this deception. And what Paul is saying is that it is worse than it looks. It is worse than it looks when we let this take over our life, when we drag our past into our present. It is worse than it looks because it is deceiving. And this is the process of anything old that is neglected to be dealt with, anything from our past that we drag into our present, or even start creating habits today in our current stage of life. We drag it into our present. And what Paul is saying is that it will destroy you. It will be rotting for you. It will spoil your life. So Paul says you need to throw it off. You need to throw it off. And he says instead, an alternative, instead, Paul says, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God. Put on your new nature, truly righteous and holy. And what Paul is saying is that as we follow Jesus, as we engage in the things that he calls us to engage with, we will begin to notice the things in our lives that we don't need, that aren't adding value to our life. Paul writes to say, take those things off and put on your new nature. See, when we ask, what difference does it make? Well, following Jesus will eventually lead you to get rid of some of the things that aren't adding value to your friendship circles, aren't adding value to your close relationships, to your family, to your married life, to your own children. Paul is saying that's what Jesus wants to do. That's how he is a difference maker, because he will point you in the direction. He will give you a new nature. All right, Pat, let's do the epic transition where you zoom in on my hand and then we'll do the next shot. Did you get the hand? This is the life that God intends for you. At the end of the day, everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. And whilst God isn't indifferent to us, he desires a great life for you. So this week, our Fall Monday is this: to ask yourself the question of what in your life needs to go. What in your life needs to go? What are the things that are dragging you back to past kind of scars, to past wounds? What are the things that are resurfacing in your life because you've been holding on to something for so long? I still remember when I was in grade 9, I went on a 4-week long camp. And in this 4-week long camp, went for a month, right? So we had this 3-day hike, and part of the 3-day hike is that we had to pack our bags for the adventure. But one of the most momentous kind of things I remember, one of the main things I remember from this 3-day hike, whilst there's crazy things that happen in a hike, it's just boys out in the bush for 3 days. Everyone came home, which is great. But one of the crazy things I remember from the hike was actually the packing phase. And I don't know if in your life you know some people who just are underprepared when they pack for camping trips or for nights away, for holidays, anything like that. During this packing phase, I definitely saw a group of grade 9 boys that were underprepared in their packing. They're bringing one water bottle and they're bringing a toothbrush. They're bringing a toothbrush, no toothpaste. That's all they have, 3 items in their pack. The underprepared packer, right? But maybe you know someone who is an overprepared packer, someone like these fellas or some of these fellas who were ready to pack everything that they had brought on this 1 month, 4-week away grade 9 camp. You see, the overprepared packer, they stuff everything into their bag. That the things that they're bringing with them aren't just things that are going to provide them comfort or just security. Like they are literally just stocking their bag just with weight. So one of the funniest things I remember from this camp was watching these fellas not even be able to walk 30 meters, let alone trying to just comprehend or think like, how do you think you're going to walk for 3 days with that pack on your back? It's just dead weight. There was things in there that were going to limit them. There was things in there that just didn't need to be. Maybe you know an overprepared packer in your own life, or maybe you are an overprepared packer. Either way, when it comes to the things we carry around in our life, this is what Paul is talking about. He's saying when it comes to the things you need to throw off, lay aside, the things you need to take off, and it comes to this question of what are the things in your life that need to go? What are the things that you're holding onto? Maybe in your life, if you were to look within your own bag, maybe it's things like anger. Maybe it's an anger that you've experienced in your own life, that in times when things get tricky or difficult, it's that short fuse for you. It's that thing that you'd say like, oh, it's something that's been passed on to me by my parents or modeled to me by my siblings. It's this one thing that I just can't let go of. Or maybe for you, it's resentment. It's bitterness. It's this thing in your bag that's holding you back. It's dragging you back into your past and leaving you just feeling gross and yuck and even more frustrated because this bitterness and resentment is completely stopping you from ever being able to forgive. Maybe for you, it's jealousy. It's not being able to let go of this comparison trap of what other people have and what you don't. Maybe for you, it's habits that you still have that you thought you'd let go of years ago, but it's still finding its way into your present. It's still finding your way into your presence right now. And you know, even with those habits and everything else that's in your bag, the anger, bitterness, jealousy, the resentment, even with all those things in your bag, you know that if you carry that or you continue to carry that into your future, it's not just going to be dragging and sore, and it's not just going to hurt you, but it's going to hurt and be sore for the people around you. It's going to bring others pain. When it comes to the people in your life that you care about most, you know that you can't continue to carry this bag around any longer. And this is what Paul is saying, is that you need to take it off. You need to unpack your bag and think about the things. What do you need to let go of? How long are you going to let it continue to corrupt, continue to decay, rupture the relationships in your life? How long are you going to let your old self destroy you? And this is Paul's encouragement. I think this would be Paul's encouragement to us today, because if we wanted to step into the life that God intended for us, if we want to have a life that we are not indifferent about, Paul's encouragement would be to follow Jesus, to even ask God, just in prayer, just in conversation, eyes open. This can just be in your head. God, what are the things in my life that I need to let go of? Because ultimately following Jesus is embracing the invitation to a new life, an invitation to step away from the old self into a new life, to embrace his grace, a brand new starting point, a life and an invitation not to be indifferent about.